This is Delhi. Please stand by for our next program. This is All India Radio. In our national program of talks tonight, we bring you a panel discussion entitled The Changing Face of Indian Cinema. The panelists include Jyoti Kapoor, acclaimed film writer, Manisha Khorde, senior screenwriter, Pooja Tolani, well-known film and television writer, and Bosco Rodriguez of All India Radio, Mumbai, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Hello listeners and welcome to our discussion on the changing face of screenwriting. The face of Indian cinema is changing slowly but surely, and behind this change is an army of great scriptwriters, not afraid of pushing limits and giving us some unique plot lines. Among them are some very talented female story writers and scriptwriters who are the reason that the movies with magnetic pull at the box office and recall value have hit the marquee in recent years. This program will detail the advent of the female story writers and the attempts to usher change in a male-dominated industry. And with me in the studios are three wonderful women screenwriters, starting with Jyoti Kapoor, who is a Mumbai-based screenwriter and former journalist. After working with publications like the Indian Express and Midday, she crossed over to filmmaking, an alumnus of Film and Television Institute of India. Jyoti has written for films like Kacha Limbu, Dawat-e-Ishq and the TV series Left, Right, Left. Her recent works include Good News and Badai Ho. Hello Jyoti and welcome to the show.
Hi Bosco.
We also have Manisha Khorde, who's written mostly laughter rides with Shah Rukh Khan, Bilu Barber, and Another Is Dole, comedy of youngsters, Tushar Kapoor and the gang, Mere Baap Pehle Aap, Akshay Khanna, a film about a writer's vodka diaries which has K.K. Menon, and Malamal Weekly.
Hello Bosco.
Hi and welcome to the show. And of course we've got Pooja Tolani with us, who is a talented contemporary writer who is part of the Writers' Room for Sacred Games Season 2 and has co-written Verdict. She is an FTI screenwriting alumna and has been awarded the Asia Society New Voices Fellowship for Screenwriter. Pooja has previously written feature films, screenplays, and of course she's also written dialogues for the Hindi remake of Surai Potra, stars Akshay Kumar.
Hi Bosco, thank you for having me.
And let's start with your journey into mainstream cinema.
Sure. So, I come from a very small town in Haryana, which is called Karnal. And it has been a wonderful journey from Karnal to Chandigarh, and from Chandigarh to Bombay, Bombay to Pune, and back to Bombay. It's been 17 years since I have been a scriptwriter, writing full-time as in.
Right, what about you?
So that reminds me, Bosco, of a wonderful line written by Gulzar ji. It says, छोटे छोटे शहरों से खाली बोर दोपहरों से हम तो झोला उठा के चले. I come from Nagpur and 2 decades in Mumbai now. I joined on a small film crew. So I began from there and then I started writing, and there is a book called Reluctant Fundamentalist. I call myself reluctant writer because it runs in my family, and when I was wanting to be a director, I was forced to become a writer because that's in my blood. So 20 years and 16, 17 films and some work with the Screenwriters Association, which I'm very proud of. Here I am.
Pooja, what about you?
Well, I guess it's just something that happened to me. Even in school, I would really enjoy writing short stories, etc. So I guess in a way, it was always coming. Mm-hmm. And I've also studied at the FTI screenwriting. I've studied there. And I was in advertising. I did some, sort of feature journalism for a bit. I used to review films when I knew nothing about writing films. But after that, when I did my screenwriting course in FTI, I've been in Bombay, struggling like the rest of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So welcome all of you to the banter right now. And why don't you share with our listeners about, your mainstream cinema, the process. You'll have a set of guidelines that you all have to follow. And on screenwriting, what are the obstacles or the hurdles that you'll have faced initially?
I think the biggest obstacle that any writer has or faces is herself. I feel like we are our biggest obstacles. Whether it's insecurity, whether it's fear of rejection, whether it's pure honest to God, laziness. We sometimes just don't write enough. And I feel like all the other problems that we are eventually going to definitely crib about in the next few minutes come from the fact that we don't give ourselves enough credit to be writers. We create the hurdles for ourselves, most definitely. Of course,
And
there are
Jyoti,
other...
what about you?
I totally agree with you, Pooja, because, there's an internal struggle that's perpetually going on in our heads. So much so that it's very difficult to crack a story. B, because it's, mass medium, you're also, sometimes when I'm writing and I've written something, I actually start thinking about how a critic will use this word and what will the headline say of that review if the film doesn't work. So there's constantly that fear sometimes of being judged. However, I would still say that the internal struggle and the self-doubt is something that we are constantly, dealing with. And if you have conquered that, I think the rest of it is basically you have to reach that very enlightened stage where self-doubt doesn't come in your way.
Right. What about you, Manisha?
So if there's always a curiosity in the common people about how films are made and what kind of process, and looks like there is some sort of a mystery to this process. So I just want to say that there is no method to this madness. How films are made, how people meet people, and that's how projects are rolled in. And it's basically a lot of networking that work comes to you. And there is no science whether पहले मुर्गी आएगी या पहले अंडा आएगा, पहले स्टोरी आएगी, पहले screenplay आएगा. It all depends on what is your starting point. Sometimes the producer comes to you with a storyline, sometimes they come with a film, sometimes you approach the producer with the films, and there is just no roadmap. What really matters the most is the people that you're working with and having faith in them, and then just taking a plunge.
Right. Now, in a male-dominated arena, now as women screenwriters, do you all face a roadblock anywhere?
Honestly, I feel in terms of the roadblock, more than the gender thing, I think our job description as writers and where we are in the hierarchy is what a lot of us face, that discrimination against the writers who actually, they create the blueprint for a film. And I feel somewhere along the line they are forgotten. Everyone, whether it's men or women, face this. I haven't faced any such discrimination, where I would feel that a male writer got, just because of the gender, he got that opportunity and I didn't. But yes, I think as writers, it's a very unifying profession in that sense. So we are all discriminated against equally, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'd like to add to this that while, of course, there is, in terms of ratio, there is many more male writers and female writers, and that sometimes becomes a thing where you get calls saying that we are looking for a female writer for this project. Well, initially, I used to find that very encouraging and heartening, which meant that, there'd be more work for me in terms of specifically me. But now I've started to, sometimes it irritates me. Because I feel like, you want a female presence in the room just so you are not going to get flack later. You just want somebody to be, making the checks. You don't want to do the hard work of understanding what the issue is, being responsible about it. You just want to palm it off to the female in the room. So I feel like sometimes that becomes an irritant. While, of course, there should definitely be more opportunity for the female writers because there is definitely a sort of a skewed ratio for sure.
Right. What about you, Manisha?
So I'm constantly challenged. 20 years and every film for me is put in some sort of a corner because I have written other genres, yes, but most of so-called success, quote unquote, comes from the comedies that I have written. And every film before the project comes to me, right from my first film, Malamal Weekly, see, women and humor, they don't really go well. So I'm constantly looked upon as, will this girl deliver? I've been facing this question since 20 years back, and even now I'm sure that the producer of my latest film is not listening, and hence I can actually say this, that the Hangama 2, which had Paresh Rawal and Shilpa Shetty, which released last year, The film, I was assuming, because I have worked with Venus for such a lovely time, the film will come to me, but no. Even today, the film had gone for writers, to dialogue writers other than me. They tried, and then it later came to me. So for me, the struggle is so real. And I have to say that, boss, this is me. This is inside me. And there is a discrepancy in the payment. I have to fight for my monies, because even though I have given 15, 16 films, out of which 7, 8 have proved at the box office, the monies are less. So my fight, unlike my two colleagues, is double-edged.
Right. So it's more of a mindset, so to speak. Talking about gender, do we have gender politics in the industry or in the content that you put in?
That's a very interesting question, Bosco, because while I don't think I have been discriminated against, on my gender in terms of, when I was hired as a screenwriter, or I went to people with a script that I have constantly felt in every single project that I have done that, interestingly, the female voices were dumbed down, and there were cases where when the film came out, I realized that ये तो डायलॉग हीरोइन बोल रही थी, ये पंचलाइन हीरो के पास कैसे चला गया. So that is a constant fight. Unfortunately, you can't really save your own female characters, despite being female screenwriter, despite giving 300 crore hits. That creative control is not with you. It's somebody, and mostly a man, who's deciding creatively what should actually go out.
Right.
So that, I feel, is a constant struggle, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. And Pooja?
Yeah, I feel like we do tend to sort of not take the responsibility of taking gender politics seriously in content a lot of the times. At least for many, many years, we haven't really been bothered with creating female or women characters who are anything beyond the way they look. Now, of course, it's changing. But if you look at it, even female-centric films, as they call it, lady-oriented movies, have male characters who are not just cardboard, they're not just cutouts. See, every film does not have to have the female character as its central lead protagonist, but even if she's there for 3 scenes, she can still be a real person, which I think we are guilty of not having done. Which is, like I said, in women-oriented films, it's usually not the case. The men, even if they have a slightly lesser of a role than the protagonist, they would still be real people. So I feel like the core of the gender politics is to first make the women real women in whatever frame, scenes or presence which they have. The other thing which we do, of course, which is enough has been talked about, is the way we sort of objectify our female characters. Even today we have high grosser films which have women characters who have absolutely zero voice, and these films are glorifying relationships where women characters don't seem to have any kind of agency, even in a so-called modern relationship. But I think that's also changing, and the more women we have coming in, the more I think people will...
You're now changing the face of
Yes.
the entire industry
Yes.
as screenwriters. Come on.
Yes. There was this one time where I was offered, like I said, I won't name the name of the show or the person. The show was about 4 men. It was a very interesting show, but it wasn't a subject that I was very good at. So I said, I would love to watch the show but not write it. And they were trying to convince me to come into the show, and they said, we're going to change one of the 4 men into a female character. So I said, but it's not required. The story doesn't need it. So that person told me, no, but we need some color in the poster. That was my sign to say, no, thank you, I'm not doing this. This is how superficial I think we are when we talk about gender politics. Let's change
I think Manisha is waiting to vent out too.
Yeah, to all my listeners, I would like to give you a regular image in local trains in Mumbai. On a bench, when there are 3 seats, to get a 4th seat, you have to kind of, shift your bums a little here and there and do some sort of an elbow fight, and that's how you get your 4th seat. So I think creating substantial female characters in the project that comes into our platter is a fight in itself. And I want to give you an example of what my colleagues were talking in theory, how it is done. For example, in Vodka Diaries, when the script came to me, it was all so writer-centric. That is, KK Menon will do this, KK Menon will do that. He's such marvelous writer. And you know what? He has a wife, and she's Mandira Bedi. I said, but what is the wife doing? She's there. No, I mean, they have this discrepancy and they have these fights in the marriage, and that's how it is. But I said, what is she? I don't think, like Pooja was saying, that on a poster we need a woman as a color. So it was very interesting to carve out a character. I said, let's make her a poet. That's how maybe their love story might have started 20 years back when they got married. So I made her a poet, and then she started reciting poetry into the scenes, and that's how their love scenes were started becoming interesting. And that's how this wonderful song, which was sung so beautifully by Rekha Bhardwaj, came into the film, and that they played on every promo. सो फ्रॉम उसकी एक वाइफ होती है से फिर एक पोएट वाइफ होती है जिसका फिर आप गाना ट्रेलर में यूज करते हो. बॉस, एवरी प्रोजेक्ट वी हैव टू डू दीज एल्बो फाइट्स टू गेट आवर फोर्थ सीट.
Very interesting. Okay, now coming to brass tacks. The first question I should have asked you long back. How is a screenplay written?
There's so many different ways of doing it wrong.
Okay, let's correct that then.
No, there's so many different ways of doing it. Every writer, I feel, has their own sort of approach. I know some people who have the guts, I don't know how, to sort of just think of like a 3-4 pager and then dive straight into dialogue, which I would just die. I have a very studious approach where I'll write a story, then I'll write the beats, and then I'm going to get into, the breakdown of the scenes and then do the dialogues. But a lot of writers I know will just get up in the middle of the night because some sort of inspiration has struck them. Never hits me. So everybody has their own system.
Yeah, I think you have these eureka moments, and this generally happens in the middle of the night. And you suddenly wake up in the middle of your sleep and you start jotting down. You do that sometimes?
It happens to me when I'm cooking.
Right? Okay, when you're cooking.
Or when I'm brushing my teeth.
Same.
I don't know why.
What about you, Manisha?
It happens to me when I get a check. I think, see, there are 2-3 types of writers. One is like writer who will write poems and novels, and there are screenwriters. And I think I, like Pooja, I fall into a category where I have not really woken up in the middle of the night, and it's a process, and there is a lot of discipline into it, which actually goes, because visualizing the whole film, which is 2 hours and 30 minutes, it's a tedious task which gives you a lot of sleep and procrastination.
And even more so for a show, because that's like 4 films
in one. Yeah.
But sometimes when you have a writer's block, and it has happened to me, mostly when I'm cooking or sometimes talking to people. I just pick up the phone, I'm talking to a friend, something, and I've suddenly zoned out, and in my head, something that they said has triggered a thought process, and I've found the solution to my story. But these magical moments only happen after you have gone through the entire journey of thrashing out a draft, and then you're just looking for those little puzzles, which sometimes solve themselves, but only after you have stayed with it long enough.
And that one piece is what is required to actually complete your story.
Yeah.
Okay, now in portraying any details in your screenwriting, do you encounter any conflicts from outside?
Yeah, so if I can get your question correctly, then because I've already given the example of Vodka Diaries,
right,
I'll extend it and I'll say that when I wanted to change Mandira Bedi's character into a poet so that, KK Menon's and her relationship gets some solid ground, nobody liked the idea. And I thought that मैंने इतना तोड़ निकाला है, but किसी को अच्छा नहीं लगा वो, because they had this thing that it will take away too much space from the story. It is taking away the space that we have created for Menon, that he is the creative person in the story. And these kind of conflicts, these kind of differences of opinions आर बैटलफील्ड. ये हमारा हॉकी का, फुटबॉल का ग्राउंड है, ये रोज हमको इधर ही खेलने का है. सो ऑन अ स्मॉलर और ऑन अ बिगर थिंग्स, डिफरेंसेस ऑफ ओपिनियंस, बिकॉज देयर आर सो मेनी क्रोर्स एंड क्रोर्स ऑफ मनी विच इज राइडिंग ऑन द बैक्स ऑफ द राइटर्स दैट वॉट एवर वी थिंक ऑफ, एवरीथिंग हैज टू बी अप्रूव्ड एंड लाइक्ड एंड अपलॉडेड बाय अ टीम. देयर इज अ डायरेक्टर, देयर आर सुपरस्टार्स, देयर इज प्रोड्यूसर, देयर इज म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर. Lots of them.
But the thing is that for writing to be effective, you sometimes need to make the world as real as possible.
You need to create that awareness.
No, not awareness.
Also.
I'm not talking about it from an agenda-oriented place.
Okay.
I'm saying just that this is the realities that we see around us. If we see a young girl who is confused about her sexual orientation, or who is bisexual and has discovered it, but that sometimes in the scheme of the reality of the story may or may not be something that the approving authorities may be happy with, because they feel like, what if there is a backlash? Because today you don't know what will offend who. So we're trying things that we're seeing around us, and that is what pushes the envelope and changes the scene, as you were saying right in the beginning.
Right.
So these are struggles that are real, and sometimes you hit a jackpot and the approving authorities, producers say, let's go with it. So what? We'll see.
Jyoti,
And
been wanting to
sometimes-
add something.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's your test as a writer, as the creator, how much will you stand up for your characters? Why did a certain character is of a certain age? For example, in Good News, all the characters were of a certain age group, and because the film did deal with the subject of infertility, and hence, there was a reason why the characters were in their late 30s or in their 40s. So the script was bought, but I was brought in and we had this interesting discussion. So I was told that, it's a very good script, we are on board, but can you reduce the age? And I said no, because the reason why they are struggling with a certain, the core conflict is age related in this case. I think so. They said, okay, for now, why don't you just change the age, let everything be the same. So I just, in the introduction of the characters, we have to, describe them. So I changed the age. And then we went to Karan Johar, who's the producer. I was so glad that the first question he asked me was, why are they so young? And I was so happy that he, of all the people, asked me the right question, and I could, defend my story and the reason. And another thing which was a problem at that time, sometimes you also have to defend your structure. For example, in Good News, again, there were 4 characters who were equally important. And 2 of those characters were coming in at the 20th or the 25th minute, basically very late in the film. And so when you have to go and cast, big actor, they will mostly not agree to coming in so late in the film. So I was told again, why don't you change the structure and bring them into the film earlier, let's say after 5 minutes. I went back again, tried it didn't work. And I went to them, I said, listen, the entire surprise element or whatever, there was a reason, a lot of thinking has gone into it. Why don't you just try? And I was told, no, you will have to make this change. And I was in the middle of making those changes when I got to know that Akshay Kumar has said yes. And when Akshay said yes, I also got to know that the other actors, Diljit and Kiara and Kareena, all of them had said yes to how the structure was as it is. And so again, I was lucky, I would say. There could have been a scenario where they had made me change it and I had gone back.
And then there was no looking back thereafter.
Oh, yes. But yeah, you just have to defend your script. Sometimes deep down that this is the only way to tell the story.
Also, to sort of, the flip side of that is sometimes when you're a new writer or when you're too deep into the project, you sometimes you can't fight hard enough, or it's just not happening. You can't pull it off. I think the most important thing in terms of craft and your own honesty to your writing, I feel, your first draft is yours. As a writer, that is yours, and that you should not be censoring in any way, whether it is for budget constraints or whether it is for, for other practical, political reasons, whatever.
Okay. So tell us, where do you see Indian cinema in the next 5 years portraying female characters?
If I'm too hopeful, maybe let's say 50 years, people will hopefully let the characters be. And that is the ideal scenario. But I do feel things have changed from ever since, I've started writing. I'm hoping for better times to come. I mean, one can only hope.
And fight.
Right. Hope and fight.
I think in 5 years, like she said, in maybe 10, 15, 50,000 years, my hope is that people will stop asking about female characters. I mean, for God's sake, don't talk about male characters who are in the center of movies. They are just characters, and the film is about a cop who does this. The film is about a guy who's very passionately in love with his girlfriend. They're not a male character passionately in love with a girlfriend.
Actually, when our gender will stop
mattering,
yeah. And people will just call us because we are good writers,
yes,
I hope.
Yes.
And not because we are women screenwriters.
Yeah, bringing some color in the poster. Basically, yeah, even with characters, hopefully we'll have films about characters who happen to be male, female or other. That's my hope.
Yes, Manisha?
I am very, very hopeful the way, it's just like more and more interesting female characters are coming on screen, and I think in coming 5 or 10 years this will become a phenomenon in itself. Like, we already have Bulbul, we already have complicated characters in web series like Made in Heaven, we already have Lipstick Under My Burqa, we have Margarita with a Straw, we have so many complex women characters which go beyond the TV opera. You know, एक तो एक खड़ूस सांस होती है, एक अच्छी बहू होती है, और those vampish, or maybe we are going beyond that, and this is only going to grow
And
up.
this is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning. We're
Right.
scratching the surface.
Right.
Yeah, and
Strangely enough, we keep saying that this is the beginning, but actually, if we look back, we had really complex characters. Like a film like Dastak with Rihanna Sultan. Somewhere along the way, we forgot to make films with women characters like that. So we hopefully will go back to the complexities that people before us have very comfortably and very confidently sort of played with.
Right.
yeah, also, I feel that, I actually hope that एक और चीज होती है, the flip side of this is that people only expect very heavy duty, serious female characters. I
Yes.
think we really need to
Lighten the moment.
lighten the moment and let women just be. Let the girls just have fun and, induce more humor into, like, women can't always be crying and cribbing, and that's not, we have to, capture all their mood, just like they are just characters who
Yeah, I
need to
completely
have their
agree.
share of
हमें
fun.
सब रस चाहिए. It will take all kinds and all sorts and all swabhavs and all personalities to make a full spectrum.
No,
So
also
Manisha, you are the
speaking-
comedy riot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know
Women
how to
can be
bring it
funny.
all out.
Yeah. No, also from a business perspective, I feel like how most people, when you take a woman-oriented subject to them, they're like, no, this is going to be serious. They just assume that if there is a central character is female, it's going to be like one Rona Dhona Rotlu film. That's something that is a perception. It's not true.
It's just a perception.
It's just
hopefully will
look at the
change.
film like Sherni. We have Vidya Balan as a forest officer. So I think we are breaking those kind of
Breaking those
stereotypes.
barriers, yeah, right.
Yeah, those stereotypes are being broken, and I'm glad about this.
Oh, good.
now.
And then on this note, we say gone are the days. And of course, with the women screenwriters, you'll have your solidarity. And may you all continue to have each other's backs, which is so very important. And I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much, Pooja Tolani,
Thank you,
Manisha
Bosco.
Khorde,
Thank
and
you, Bosco.
Jyoti Kapoor
Thank
for joining
you.
us
Thanks
here
for
in the
having us.
studios.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bosco.
Thank you, all the listeners. Thank you being there.
In our national program of Talks Tonight, you were listening to the panel discussion entitled The Changing Face of Indian Cinema. The panelists were Jyoti Kapoor, acclaimed film writer, Manisha Khorde, senior screenwriter, Pooja Tolani, well-known film and television writer, and Bosco Rodriguez of All India Radio, Mumbai, who initiated and moderated the discussion. Conceptualized by Naveen K. Gupta of All India Radio, Delhi, this program was produced and presented by Srimati Jyotsana Ketkar of All India Radio, Mumbai, and came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.